Good morning, everyone. From today, we will start the chapter number 3 Salient Features of Constitution. The Indian Constitution is unique in its content and spirit. Though borrowed from almost every constitution of the world, the Constitution of India has several salient features that distinguish it from the constitutions of other countries. It should be noted at the outset that number of original features of the Constitution as adopted in 1949 have undergone substantial changes on the account of several amendments, particularly 7th, 42nd, 44th, 73rd, 74th, 97th and 101th Amendment. In fact, the 42nd Amendment Act in 1976 is known as Mini Constitution due to the important and large number of changes made by various parts of the Constitution. However, in Keshavananda Bharati case in 1973, the Supreme Court ruled that constituent power of the Parliament under Article 368 does not enable it to alter the basic structure of the Constitution. Salient features of the Constitution. The salient features of the Constitution as it stands today are as follows. First, lengthiest written constitution. Constitutions are classified into written like an American Constitution or unwritten like British Constitution. The Constitution of India is the lengthiest of all the written constitutions of the world. It is very comprehensive, elaborate and detailed document. Originally in 1949, the Constitution contained a preamble, 395 articles, which is divided into 22 parts and 8 schedules. Presently, 2019, it consists of the preamble, about 470 articles, which is divided into 25 parts and 12 schedules. The various amendments carried out since 1951 have deleted about 20 articles and one part, that is part 7, and added about 95 articles and 4 parts, that is 9A, 6A, 9B and 14A, and the 4 schedules 9, 10, 11 and 12. No other constitution in the world has so many articles and schedules. 4 factors have contributed the elephantine size of our constitution. They are geographical factors, that is the vastness of country and its diversity. Historical factors, example, the influence of Government of India Act in 1935, which was itself very bulky. Single constitution for both center and state. Dominance of legal luminaries in the Constituent Assembly. The Constitution contains not only fundamental principles of governance but also detailed administrative provisions. Further, those matters which in the other modern democratic countries have been left to the ordinary legislation or established political conventions have been also included in the constitutional document of India. Second, drawn from various sources. The Constitution of India has borrowed most of its provision from the Constitution of various other countries as well as from the Government of India Act 1935. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar proudly acclaimed that the Constitution of India has been framed after ransacking all the known constitutions of the world. The structural part of the Constitution is to a large extent derived from Government of India Act 1935. The philosophical part of Constitution, that is the fundamental rights and directive principles of the state policy, derive their inspiration from the American and Irish constitutions respectively. The political part of the Constitution, that is the principle of cabinet government and the relations between executive and the legislature, have been largely drawn from the British Constitution. The other provisions of the Constitution have been drawn from the constitutions of Canada, Australia, Germany, USSR, now Russia, France, South Africa, Japan, and so on. The most profound influence and the material source of the Constitution is the Government of India Act 1935. The federal scheme, judiciary, governors, emergency powers, the public service commissions, and most of the administrative details are drawn from this act. More than half of the provisions of the Constitution are identical to or bear a close resemblance to the Act of 1935. Third, blend of rigidity and flexibility. Constitutions are also classified into rigid and flexible. A rigid constitution is one that requires a special procedure for its amendments. As for example, the American Constitution, a flexible constitution, on the other hand, is one that can be amended in the same manner as ordinary laws are made. For example, British Constitution. The Constitution of India is neither rigid nor flexible, but a synthesis of both. Article 368 provides for the two types of amendments. Some provisions can be amended by special majority of the parliament, that is, two-thirds majority of the members of each house present and voting, and a majority of total membership of each house. And some other provisions can be amended by a special majority of the parliament with the ratification by half of the total states. At the same time, some provisions of the constitution can be amended by a simple majority of the parliament in the manner of ordinary legislative process. Notably, these amendments do not come under Article 368. Fourth, the federal system of unitary bias. The Constitution of India establishes a federal system of government. It contains all the usual features of the federation, viz. Two government, division of powers, written constitution, supremacy of constitution, rigidity of constitution, independent judiciary, and bicameralism. However, the Indian Constitution also contains a large number of unitary or non-federal features with a strong center, single constitution, single citizenship, flexibility of constitution, integrated judiciary appointment of state governor, integrated judiciary, appointment of state governor by center, all India services, emergency provisions, and so on. Moreover, the term federation has nowhere been used in the Constitution. Article 1, on other hand, described the India as a union of states, which implies two things. 1. Indian federation is not a result of an agreement by the states, and 2. No state has the right to secede from the federation. Hence, the Indian Constitution has been variously described as a federal in form but unitary in spirit, that is, the quasi-federal by K.C. VR, bargaining federalism by Maurice Jones, and cooperative federalism by Granville Austin, federation with the centralizing tendencies by Io Jennings, and so on. Fifth, the parliamentary form of government. The Constitution of India has opted for the British parliamentary system of government rather than the American presidential system of government. The parliamentary system is based on the principle of cooperation and coordination between the legislative and executive organs, while the presidential system is based on the doctrine of separation of powers between the two organs. The parliamentary system is also known as the Westminster model of government, responsible government and the cabinet government. The Constitution establishes the parliamentary system not only at the center but also in the other states. The features of parliamentary government in India: presence of nominal and real executive, Majority party rule. The collective responsibility of executive to the legislature. Membership of the ministers in the legislature. Leadership of the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister. Dissolution of lower house, that is Lok Sabha or Assembly. Even though the Indian parliamentary system is largely based on the British pattern, there are some fundamental differences between the two. For example, the Indian Parliament is not a sovereign body like British Parliament. Further, the Indian state has an elected head, that is republic, while British state has hereditary head, that is monarchy. In the parliamentary system, whether India or Britain, the role of Prime Minister has become so significant and crucial that political scientists like to call it a prime ministerial government. Sixth, synthesis of parliamentary sovereignty and the judicial supremacy. The doctrine of sovereignty of the parliament is associated with the British Parliament, while the principle of judicial supremacy with that of the American Supreme Court. Just as the Indian parliamentary system differs from the British system, the scope of judicial review power of the Supreme Court in India is narrower than that of what exists in the US. This is because the American Constitution provides for the due process of law. Against that, the procedure established of law contained in the Indian Constitution, according to Article 21. Therefore, the framers of Indian Constitution have preferred a proper synthesis between the British principle of parliamentary sovereignty and the American principles of judicial supremacy. The Supreme Court, on one hand, can declare the parliamentary laws as unconstitutional through its power of judicial review. The Parliament, on the other hand, can amend the major portion of the Constitution through its constituent power. Seventh, integrated and independent judiciary. The Indian Constitution establishes a judicial system that is integrated as well as independent. The Supreme Court stands at the top of integrated judicial system in the country. Below it, there are high courts at the state level. Under a high court, there is a hierarchy of subordinate courts, that is district courts and the other lower courts. The single system of courts enforces both the central laws as well as the state laws. Unlike in USA, there is a federal laws that are enforced by the several judiciary that are enforced by the federal judiciary and the states laws that are enforced by the state judiciary. The Supreme Court is a federal court, the highest court of the appeal, the guarantor of fundamental rights of the citizens and the guardian of the Constitution. Hence, the Constitution has made various provisions to ensure its independence, security of tenure of the judges, fixed service conditions for the judges, all the expenses of the Supreme Court charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, prohibition on the discussion on the conduct of judges in the legislature, ban on the practice of retirement, power to the punish for its contempt vested in the Supreme Court, separation of judiciary from executive, and so on. Fundamental rights. Part 3 of the Indian Constitution guarantees 6 fundamental rights to all citizens. First, right to equality from Article 14 to Article 18. Second, right to freedom, Article 19 to 22. Third, rights against exploitation, Article 23 to 24. Fourth, rights to freedom of religion, Article 25 to 28. Sixth, cultural and educational rights, Article 29 to 30. And fifth, the right of constitutional remedies, Article 32. The fundamental rights are meant for promoting the idea of political democracy. They operate as limitations on the tyranny of executive and arbitrary laws of the legislature. They are justiciable in nature, and that is, they are enforceable by the courts of their violation. The aggrieved person can directly go to the Supreme Court, which can use the writs of habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and the quo warranto for the restoration of his rights. Moreover, the fundamental rights are not absolute and subject to the reasonable restrictions. Further, they are not sacrosanct and can be curtailed or repealed by the Parliament through a Constitutional Amendment Act. They can also be suspended during the operation by national emergency except the rights guaranteed by Article 20 and 21. Ninth, directive principles of the state policy. According to Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the directive principles of the state policy is a novel feature of the Indian Constitution. They are enumerated in Part 4 of the Constitution. They can be classified into the three broad categories, that is, socialistic, Gandhian, and liberal intellectual. The directive principles are meant for promoting the ideal of social and economic democracy. They seek to establish the welfare state in India. However, unlike the fundamental rights, the directives are non-justiciable in nature. That is, they are not enforceable by the courts for their violation. Yet the Constitution itself declares that these principles are fundamental in the governance of country, and it shall be the duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. Hence, they impose a moral obligation on the state authorities for their application. But the real force, that is the sanction behind them, is political, that is public opinion. In the Minerva Mills case 1980, the Supreme Court held that Indian Constitution is founded on the bedrock of the balance between fundamental rights and directive principles. 10th, fundamental duties. The original constitution did not provide for the fundamental duties of the citizens. These were added during the operation of internal emergency in 1975 to 77 by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976 on the recommendation of Swaran Singh Committee. The 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 added one more fundamental duty. The Part 4A of the Constitution, which consists of only one article, 51A, specifies the 11 fundamental duties that are to respect the Constitution, national flag and national anthem, to protect the sovereignty, unity and integrity of the country, to promote the spirit of common brotherhood amongst all people, to preserve the rich heritage of the composite culture, and so on. The fundamental duties serve as a reminder to the citizens that while enjoying their rights, they have also to be quite conscious of duties they owe towards their country, their society, and their fellow citizens. However, like directive principles, the duties are also non-justiciable in nature. 11th, a secular state. The Constitution of India stands for the secular state, hence it does not uphold any particular religion as the official religion of the Indian state. The following provisions of the Constitution reveals the secular character of Indian state. A. The term secular was added to the preamble of the Indian Constitution by 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. B. The preamble secures to all citizens of India liberty of belief, faith, and worship. C. The state shall not deny to any person equality before law or equal protection of the laws. D. The state shall not discriminate against any citizens on the ground of religion. Article 15. E. The equality of opportunity for all citizens in the matter of public employment. Article 16. F. All persons are equally entitled to the freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess, practice, and propagate any religion. Article 25. G. Every religious domination or any of its sections shall have right to manage its religious affairs. Article 26. H. No person shall be compelled to pay any taxes for the promotion of a particular religion. Article 27. I. No religious instruction shall be provided in any educational institute maintained by the state. Article 28. J. Any section of the citizen shall have the right to conserve its distinct language, script, or culture. Article 29. K. All minorities shall have the right to establish and administer educational institution of their choice. Article 30. L. The state shall endeavour to secure for all citizens a uniform civil code. Article 44. The Western concept of secularism connotes a complete separation between religion, that is, church, and the state, that is, the politics. This negative concept of secularism is inapplicable in Indian situation, where a society is multi-religious. Hence, the Indian constitution embodies the positive concept of secularism, that is, giving equal respect to all the religions or protecting all the religions equally. Moreover, the Constitution has also abolished the old system of communal representation, that is, the reservation of the seats in the legislature on the basis of religion. However, it provides for the temporary reservation of the seats for the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes to ensure the adequate representation to them. 12. Universal adult franchisee. The Indian Constitution adopts universal adult franchisee as the basis of elections to the Lok Sabha and state legislative assemblies. Every citizen who is not less than 18 years of age has a right to vote without discrimination of the caste, race, religion, sex, literacy, wealth, and so on. The voting age was reduced to 18 years from 21 years in 1989 by 61st Constitutional Amendment Act of 1988. The introduction of universal adult franchisee by both the constitutional makers was a bold experiment and highly remarkable in the view of vast size of the country, its huge population, high poverty, social inequality, and overwhelming illiteracy. The universal adult franchisee makes the democracy broad based, enhances the self respect and prestige of the common people, upholds the principle of equality, enables minority to protect their interest, and opens up new hopes and vistas for the weaker sections. 13. The single citizenship. Although Indian constitution is federal and envisages a dual polity at center and at states, it provides for only a single citizenship like Indian citizenship. In countries like USA, on other hand, each person is not only a citizen of USA but also the citizen of particular state to dual sets of the rights, one conferred by the national government and other by the state government. In India, all citizens, irrespective of their state in which they are born or reside, enjoy the same political and civil rights of citizenship all over the country, and no discrimination is made between them. Despite the constitutional provision for single citizenship and uniform rights for all the people, India has been witnessing the communal rights, class conflicts, caste wars, linguistic clashes, ethnic disputes. This means that the cherished goal of the constitution makers to build a united and integrated Indian nation has not been fully realized. 14. Independent bodies. The Indian Constitution not only provides for the legislative, executive, and judicial organs of the government, central and state, but also establishes certain independent bodies. They are They are envisaged by the Constitution as the bulwarks of the democratic system of government in India. These are: A. The Election Commission is to ensure free and fair election to the parliament, the state legislature, the office of presidents of the India, and the office of vice president of India. B. The Controller and Auditor General of India to audit the accounts of the central and state governments. He acts as the guardian of public purse and the comments on the legality of the propriety of the government expenditure. C. The Union Public Service Commission to conduct examinations for the recruitment of all India services and the higher central services and to advise the President on disciplinary matters. D. State Public Service Commissions in every state to conduct the examination for the recruitment to state service and to advise the governor on disciplinary matters. The Constitution ensures the independence of these bodies through various provisions like security of tenure, fixed service conditions, expenses being charged on the Consolidated Fund of India, and so on. 15th. The emergency provisions. The Indian Constitution contains elaborate emergency provisions to enable the President to meet any extraordinary situation effectively. The rationality behind incorporation of these provisions is to safeguard the sovereignty, unity, integrity, and the security of the country, the democratic political system, and the Constitution. The Constitution envisages three types of emergencies, namely: first, the national emergency on the ground of war or external aggressions or armed rebellion. Article 352. Second, state emergency, that is the President's rule on the ground of failure of constitutional machinery in the state. Article 356, or the failure to comply with the direction of the centre. Article 365. And financial emergency on the ground of threat to the financial stability or credit of India. Article 360. During an emergency, the central government becomes all powerful and the states go into the total control of the center. It converts the federal structure into unitary one without a formal amendment of the constitution. This kind of transformation of the political system from federal during normal times to unitary during emergency is the unique feature of the constitution. 16. Three-tier government. Originally, the Indian Constitution, like any other federal constitution, provided for a dual polity and contained provisions with regard to the organization and the powers of central and states. Later, the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Acts of 1992 have added the third tier of government, that is local, which is not found in any other constitution of the world. The 73rd Amendment Act of 1992 gave constitutional recognition to the panchayats, rural local governments, by adding a new Part 9 and new Schedule 11 to the Constitution. Similarly, the 74th Amendment Act of 1992 gave constitutional recognition to the municipalities, urban local governments, by adding a new Part 9A and a new Schedule 12 to the Constitution. 17. Cooperative societies. The 97th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2011 gave a constitutional status and protection to the cooperative societies in this context. It made the following three changes in the Constitution. First, it made the right to form cooperative societies a fundamental right of Article 19. Second, it included a new directive principle of the state policy on promotion of cooperative societies according to Article 43B. Third, it added new Part 9B of the Constitution, which is entitled as the Cooperative Societies, Article 243 ZH to Article 243 ZT. The new Part 9b contains various provisions to ensure that the cooperative societies in the country function in a democratic, professional, autonomous, and economically sound manner. It empowers the Parliament in respect of multi state cooperative societies and the state legislature in respect of the cooperative societies to make appropriate law. Criticism of the Constitution. The Constitution of India, as framed and adopted by the Constituent Assembly of India, has been criticized on the following grounds. First, a borrowed constitution. The critics opined that the Indian constitution contains nothing new but original. Nothing new and original. They described it as a borrowed constitution or a bag of borrowing, or hodgepodge constitution or a patchwork of several documents of the world's constitutions. However, this criticism is unfair and illogical. This is because the framers of constitution made necessary modification in the features of borrowed that are borrowed from the other constitutions for their suitability to the Indian conditions, at the same time avoiding their faults. While answering to the above criticism, the Constituent Assembly in the Constituent Assembly, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the chairman of drafting committee, said, "One likes to ask whether there can be anything new in a constitution framed at this hour in the history of the world. More than 100 years have rolled over when the first written constitution was drafted. It has been followed by many countries, reducing their constitution to writing. What the scope of constitution should be has long been settled. Similarly, what are the fundamentals of the constitution are recognized all over the world. Given this fact, all the constitution in their main provision must look similar. The only new things, if there can be any, in a constitution framed so late in a day are the variations made to remove the faults and accommodate it to the needs of the country. The charge of producing a blind copy of constitutions of other countries is based, I am sure, on inadequate study of the constitution." Second, the carbon copy of 1935 Act. The critics say that the framers of constitution have included a large number of provisions of Government of India Act 1935 in the Constitution of India. Hence, they called Constitution as a carbon copy of 1935 Act or amended version of 1935 Act. For example, N. Srinivasan observed that Indian Constitution is both in language and substance a close copy of Act of 1935. Similarly, Sir Ivor Jennings, a British constitutionalist, said that the Constitution derives directly from the Government of India Act of 1935, from which, in fact, many of its provisions are copied almost textually. Further, P.R. Deshmukh, the member of Constituent Assembly, commented that the Constitution is essentially the Government of India Act 1935 with only adult franchise added. The same Dr. B.R. Ambedkar answered the above criticism in the Constituent Assembly in a following way. As to the accusation that the draft constitution has reproduced a good part and the provisions of Government of India Act 1935, I make no apologies. There are nothing to be ashamed of in borrowing the fundamental ideals of the borrowing. It involves no plagiarism. Nobody holds any patent rights in the fundamental ideas of the Constitution. What I am sorry about is that the provisions taken from the Government of India Act relate mostly to the details of administration. Third, an un-Indian and anti-Indian constitution. According to the critics, the Indian constitution is un-Indian or anti-Indian because it does not reflect the political traditions and the spirit of India. They said that the foreign nature of the constitutions makes it unsuitable to the Indian constitution makes it unsuitable for the Indian situation or unworkable in India. In this context, K. Hanumanthaya, a member of Constituent Assembly, commented, "We wanted the music of Veena or sitar, but here we have the music of English band. That was because our constitution makers were educated that way." Similarly, Loknath Misra, another member of Constituent Assembly, criticized the constitution as a slavish imitation of the West, much more a slavish surrender to the West. Further, Lakshminarayan Sahu, also a member of Constituent Assembly, observed that the ideals on which this fundamental spirit draft constitution is framed have no manifest in relation to the fundamental spirit of India. This constitution would not prove suitable and would break down soon after being brought into the operation. Fourth, an un-Gandhian constitution. According to the critics, the Indian constitution is un-Gandhian because it does not contain the philosophy and ideals of Mahatma Gandhi, the father of Indian nation. They opined that the constitution should have been raised and built upon the village members of the village panchayats and the district panchayats. In this context, the same member of the Constituent Assembly, K. Hanumanthaya, said that is exactly the kind of constitution Mahatma Gandhi did not want and did not envisage. T. Prakasam, another member of the Constituent Assembly, attributed this lapse to the Ambedkar's non-participation in the Gandhian movement and the antagonism towards the Gandhian ideas. Fifth, the elephantine size. The critics stated that Indian constitution is too bulky and too detailed and contains some unnecessary elements. Sir Ivor Jennings, a British constitutionalist, observed that the provisions borrowed were not always well selected and that the constitution, generally speaking, was too long and complicated. In this context, the H.V. Kamath, a member of Constituent Assembly, commented, "The emblem and the crest that we have selected for our assembly is an elephant. It is perhaps the consonance with that our constitution too is the bulkiest that the world has ever produced." He also said, "I am sure the House does not agree that we should make the constitution an elephantine one." 6. The paradise of the lawyers. According to the critics, the Indian constitution is too legalistic and very complicated. They opine that the legal language and the phraseology adopted in the constitution makes it a complex document. The same Sir Ivor Jennings called it the lawyer's paradise. In context, H.K. Maheshwari, the member of Constituent Assembly, observed, "The draft tends to make people more litigious and more inclined to go to the law courts, less truthful and less likely to follow the methods of truth and non-violence." If I may say so, the draft is really lawyer's paradise. It opens up the vast avenues of litigation and will give our able, ingenious lawyers a plenty of work to do. Similarly, P.R. Deshmukh, another member of Constituent Assembly, said, "I should, however, like to say that the draft of articles that have been brought before the House by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar seems to my mind to be far too ponderous, like the ponderous tomes of new law manual. The law document dealing with the Constitution hardly uses so much of padding and so much of verbiage. Perhaps it is difficult for them to compose a document which should be, to my mind, not a law manual but the socio political document, a vibrating pulsating, and the life giving document. But to our misfortune, that was not to be, and we have been burdened with so much of words, and the words which could have been very easily eliminated. Thank you. Here we are done with the chapter number 3, the salient features of the Constitution. There are several tables given at the end of this chapter. I will refer to one of the most important table of this chapter, and that is the sources of Constitution at glance. The sources: first, Government of India Act 1935. Features borrowed: Federal scheme, Office of Governor, Judiciary, Public Service Commissions, Emergency Provisions, and Administrative details. Second, British Constitution. Parliamentary government, rule of law, legislative procedure, single citizenship, cabinet system, prerogative rights, parliamentary privileges, and bicameralism. Third, US Constitution, the fundamental rights, independence of judiciary, judicial review, impeachment of the president, removal of the court and high court judges, and the post of vice president. Fourth, Irish Constitution, directive principles of the state policy, nomination of members to the Rajya Sabha and method of election of the president. Fifth, Canadian Constitution, the federation with a strong center, vesting of residuary powers in the center, appointment of the state governors by center, and the advisory jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Sixth, the Australian Constitution, concurrent list, freedom of trade, commerce, and intercourse, and joint sitting of the two houses of the parliament. Seventh, the Weimar Constitution of Germany, the suspension of fundamental rights during emergency. Eighth, Soviet Constitution, then USSR, now Russia, the fundamental duties and the ideals of justice, social, economic, and political in the preamble. Ninth, French Constitution, the Republic and the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity in the preamble. 10th, South African Constitution, the procedure of amendment of the Constitution and the election of members to the Rajya Sabha. And 11th, Japanese Constitution, procedure established by law. Here we complete the chapter number 3, salient features of Constitution. Please look into the other tables given at the end of the chapter. Thank you. And if you like this audiobook, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, UPSC Shorts. Thank you. Have a good day.